Hi, I'm Candy McDonald. I'm the editor of The Stable in Sydney, in Australia, and we're here today to talk about craft. I actually know from experiences, good and bad, as an advertising creative, that craft can make an idea really good or just really, really average, and that it's also the thing that has to work hard, usually has to work hardest in a project to be valued. So that's really why D&AD's unrelenting quest for promoting excellence is really important, and why we're here tonight, why this is important tonight. So I'd just like to introduce all our speakers. We've got Adi Halfin from Israel, who's the director of Leaf. Lou Allen, who's the head of production and executive producer at Factory Studios. And was the president for sound design and use of music. We had Perez, who was the president of casting and is casting director of Perez in Spain. Sergio Lopez Ferrero, who was a judge in cinematography and is the chief production officer, EMEA at McCann Worldgroup in UK. We have Charlotte Marmion, who's the managing director and an executive producer of Iconoclast in France, and Kate Owen-Lloyd, who is the president of editing. So I think that we should get started. Adi has been nominated as the first person to talking about Apple underdogs, which is one of my very favorite ads.
Guys, I just got us a meeting with Vivian.
What? How?
I just bumped into her.
And what, you just asked for a meeting?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do?
Actually,
When?
just now.
No, when's the meeting?
Oh, Thursday, 8 a.m.
Next Thursday.
Yes.
No, this Thursday.
What?
That's impossible.
We can do this, okay? Round Box is back.
It's just a sketch. That's all we have.
2 days? We need 2 weeks.
This is how we get off this floor.
Dave, can you get some sales figures on pizza boxes?
I feel sick.
It's so simple. Round pizza, round box. Perfect.
Hey, who's hungry?
We have to prove what's wrong with pizza boxes.
They're square.
Wasted space.
Yeah.
Do I really have to go see Mike in finance?
Yep.
Hey, Mike. I was wondering if you could send me this.
Inbox.
We have this idea. We need some sort of 3D prototype.
I gotta pick up the kids.
I just want to get you all together. We need to find a name for the box.
Roundabout.
Squircle?
Circle box?
Who's that?
Hey, Siri, turn on Do Not Disturb. Brian.
I'm awake!
Hey, Siri, tell Bridget I'm running late.
No. This is wrong. This is all wrong.
Dave, can you please double check those figures for us?
Did anyone hear from Ed in warehouse?
He's putting together the prototype now.
What are you guys working on?
Nothing.
Nothing. Move that over there.
Make that title bigger.
Guys!
We're almost there.
It all works. I mean, I don't even...
What are you doing, bud? Hey, can I have that back?
I'll email you the video.
Just airdrop it to me.
Sweet. You guys, I just got the prototype.
Whoa. This is gonna look so good in the presentation.
Awesome.
Wow.
I'm awake.
It's time.
Did anyone press a button?
Adi, would you like to tell us why you chose Apple?
Yes, well, first of all, I think it's a terrific piece. And if we're discussing craft here and, you know, the way a film goes between the from the idea until the execution, I think personally, and also the jury felt this way in our discussions. We felt that it's really almost perfectly executed in terms of all the things that put it together. If it's the casting, the cinematography, the genre, the editing, production design, music, the whole thing comes together and so beautifully and also seamlessly in a way, which is, I think, something which is very important sometimes, not to feel the effort of crafting something, you know, just enjoying it as an audience. And especially us professionals, we're very critical about things and we pay attention to every single detail. But as an audience, I find myself just enjoying it and not even realizing that, what is it, 3 minutes, I think? You know, that 3 minutes have passed and it's all just on point there. And one really main thing that we discussed and our president Sarah emphasized was the cinematic feel and the fact that, you know, it feels like a short Hollywood film, just really, really condensed, and it's something that we felt is refreshing in a way. It's not that it hasn't been done before in advertising. We all know the, you know, BMW campaign that they did a few years ago, and you know, some things were better than others, but for some reason this kind of format didn't quite catch enough. And this piece is really refreshing in the way that it's just bringing cinema into this world of advertising, and so beautifully. Like, if you pay just the attention to all the details, and you get in 3 minutes so much, like the characters and their private lives and and one really important thing is that it's very relatable. I mean, the characters are relatable, and I think that, you know, I find myself watching this and saying, oh yeah, this definitely looks like pre-production of anything, you know, or whatever, any kind of process I've been through. And one last thing is the seamlessness of inserting the product into the film. Mostly, I think it's this idea of a short film selling something. It's not like classic advertising, and it's not these long formats that Apple also do nowadays, or any other companies. It's an ad, but it's also cinema, and it kind of brings the two together.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Lou, you chose Facebook Never Lost.
Was that a pivotal historical moment we just went stumbling past? Well, here we are, dancing in the rumbling dark. So come a little closer, give me something to grasp. Give me your beautiful, crumbling heart. We're working every dread day that is given us, feeling like the person people meet really isn't us. Like we're gonna buckle underneath the trouble, like any minute now the struggle's gonna finish us. And then we smile at all our friends. Even when I'm weak and I'm breaking, I stand weeping at the train station, 'cause I can see your faces. There is so much peace to be found in people's faces. I love people's faces.
This was a really interesting take on what became the coronavirus formula. So I'm really interested to hear why you chose it.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the reasons we did choose it. Well, I chose it, but as a jury, we chose it because it really shows what sound and music can do to a piece of film. I think we've seen that so many times that if I encouraged everybody in the jury to listen to some bits and pieces with the sound down, or just completely mute, and actually it was a piece of film that you could just see on the TV with no sound on, and you would just be like, oh, it's another one of those films. But as soon as you put the sound on, and that track is just incredible. It's a beautiful track. It's beautifully edited. I'm not quite sure whether the music track came first or the edit came first, but if you look at all of her lyrics, they picked all the right lyrics. It's brilliant. It's absolutely beautiful. She's great, Kate Tempest. I'm a big fan of hers, but there's a part in there when about a minute in when her voice almost cracks, and it's really emotional. And I think it's just really now. I think we've all seen a lot of this, and it's quite saturated. But if we're talking about craft, especially music and sound design, it's without that track, it's just not the same piece of film. We could have put anything on there and it just wouldn't have had the same effect. And I think whoever chose the music is amazing, because it sounds a bit corny, but it's about faces. It's Facebook. It's just really, it's simple, but it just really works. And like I say, the music edit is just, it just fits it so well. And every time I watch it, it makes me feel emotional. It makes me feel like, we're all in this together.
Kate, this was one of your choices as well. Why did you choose it?
We, specifically with the craft of editing and the emotion that you created with a lot of found footage, but also the timing and the rhythm and the placement with the music. It was something that, yes, it was a coronavirus piece, but if you almost took that out, it was still such a strong, beautiful editorial piece that, same thing, gave you emotion, gave you a connection, and gave you something that really, it made you want to watch it to the end, because you were just in that moment, and it gave you an emotional journey. It's a very rare thing where you're enjoying the music, you're enjoying the editing, you're enjoying the direction and the cinematography, and the whole thing creates this beautiful, heartfelt piece that was just, it was magical.
Edu Perez, you chose All That We Share.
These people have a lot to talk about. They just don't know it yet. In a minute, we'll show them that they have more in common than they think.
Tak fordi I er kommet. Thomas, vil du stille dig der? Og Aske? Thomas, du bor med din familie i et dejligt hus på Vinkelhøj 8 i Viby. Før I flyttede ind, var det faktisk dit barndomshjem, Aske.
Det er rigtigt. Ja.
Mathilde, vil du komme herop? I to har faktisk stået over for hinanden før.
Okay.
Men der var I 12 år. Og de var i en rugbykamp.
Okay, ja.
Kampen endte i øvrigt 42-0 til Askes hold.
Tak for kampen.
Ja, tak.
Inger. Mathilde, den nat, du kom til verden for 27 år siden på Christiania, var Inger det første menneske, du så.
Var du min jordmor? Det var så fint. Kan du huske det?
Just below the surface, a total stranger can turn out to be someone you're actually connected to. Someone who rouses forgotten memories. Like the very first kiss. Someone like Thomas, who put out a fire at Vibeka's place. If we approach each other, we might find out that we share the same destiny.
Rana og Maha, I kom til Danmark fra Syrien for 4 år siden. Dorit og Jan, I har en lignende historie fra 2. verdenskrig.
Jeg har prøvet at være flygtning, og jeg vil aldrig glemme det. Det har betydet usigeligt meget.
Og Rikke, det var din oldefar, der risikerede sit liv ved at sejle Jan over Øresund den oktoberaften i 1943.
It's easy to mind your own business. It takes a little more effort to mind the community. But doesn't the feeling of having something in common, something that connects us, make it all worthwhile? TV2, all that we share.
Wow. I don't know if you like it, but the casting jury really put out, like, it was such an amazing challenge in terms of casting, the craft of casting. I mean, how this Danish crew found people who was linked by different things. I mean, at the beginning, you can see that they talk about childhood things, maybe a roping match or something like that. But then the story grows. I mean, like, and you find these characters which are connected by really far away links, like the Second World War, great grandfather, which is an amazing story, and how everything is real. That's the thing that the casting jury was really touched by. Even all the feelings, the emotions that the people, because they are real people, they bring out on the recording session, because it looks more like a documentary instead of a beautiful commercial like the Apple that Adi talked about. I mean, that was discussed as well by the casting jury. But this one, it was so real, so intense, so touching, and the research that the crew, the production crew, the casting crew, they did. I mean, we said, like, we all love this one. We would like this commercial to be in our reels, like the most proud job ever done, but we don't know how to start. I mean, what's the first step to take on this research? Who's the first person to choose? What's the link? Where is the link? I mean, I'm sure that there were like tons of people mixing stories, you know, like with blackboards or something. But I mean, for us, I mean, it's like the most amazing casting research probably ever done.
Right. It's so rare for the casting to make the advertisement, and that casting actually makes the advertisement.
Yeah, because the filmmaking is not so great. It's not like a great story. There's not a big production design. There's not like a big budget, as you can see, but the story and the characters are so real that it's perfect.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sergio, you chose Lacoste's Crocodile Inside.
Le ciel bleu sur nous peut s'effondrer et la terre peut bien s'écrouler. Je m'abonne si tu m'aimes, je me fous du monde entier que nous aurons pour nous l'éternité dans le bleu de toute l'immensité.
Sergio, why did you choose that one? It's obvious, but why did you choose that one?
Why not? Cinematography is a very difficult category, right? Because it comes from the decisions that for a client, selection of an agency, of a production company, director, and cinematography. And when in the past we've seen commercials that rely so heavily into visual effects, the cinematography becomes very technical. And this is the opposite. In this specific commercial, it's all at the service of the idea. And what we liked about it is that cinematography became seamless and at the service of the narrative of the commercial, not restricted by visual effects. The first thing that I loved about this commercial personally is that the kind of date that they chose is really ugly. It's a typical gray Parisian date, right? When you have all the things in control and you can control the lighting, people tend to go to like either very dramatic days or very beautiful sunny days. And this is a typical Northern European day on purpose, right? And how the camera feels dynamic and fresh and focused and how it helps reveal things. It's a good example of cinematography at its best on the service of the narrative of a creative idea. So we thought that of this year was one of the best examples of cinematography for sure.
Right, cinematography telling the story, really. So let's look at Apple Bounce. Okay, cool.
I just learned some jazz today, it's true. You just learned some jazz today, and you gon' learn, you gon' learn. It was just past 1 when 2, 3 man from 4, 5 step to the door like, oh my gosh, just throw that cash in a back bag, run around the back and pull up the track, cause yo, couldn't believe them stories conceived for no reason. Please just go and leave them fakies in season, but not pre them, cause nowadays you couldn't find me like when them CCTV, them see them can't program me. Better them try to go and see. Taking the heights like Andes. Andes man one step to me, couldn't get the best of me, couldn't beat the rest of we check one way. Touch the brakes and go slow, oh no. Dust them out with the one quick solo. Boom. I just learned some jazz today, it's true. You just learned some jazz today, and you gon' learn some jazz today, yes you gon' learn, you gon' learn, you gon' learn. You gon' learn this jazz today, yes.
So obviously there's an amazing work of set design in this Apple ad. I don't know if you've seen the behind the scene, but what they did is that they basically built the whole street in a platform in order to hide all the bouncing device. And I think that's why I picked up this ad and Lacoste is a little bit the same, is the will of making as much as possible on camera, because nowadays you can pretty much achieve everything in VFX. But you know, in this ad, what they did is created all the set design in order to make all the effect on camera, like the bouncing device, or if you look at the scene on the bench, they built the set 90 degrees in order to have him bounce back and come back and have as less possible as VFX as they could. And there's also an interesting thing in the style they decide for the design of the streets. And I think it's a little bit the same in Apple, and that goes back to what you say, Sergio. The streets are not very fancy. They are pretty simple and almost bare, you know. And it's the same for cinematography. The shots are very long. There's not a lot of cuts. And there's some kind of simplicity in the Lacoste. That's a little bit the same. It's not a big fancy apartment with a lot of ornaments. It's like the walls are white. It's a forecast day. It's not that chic. It's not that chic of a street. And I think that this simplicity and this almost bareness really makes you focus on the idea and on the performance of the actors, which are in both cases some kind of described some kind of inner state and emotions, you know. And even though it's huge amount of work technically in both films, there's some kind of simplicity and efficiency that really leaves the space to the idea and the storytelling that the ads are trying to convey.
Fantastic. For me, the remarkable thing about Apple Bounce is that the craft is actually the idea, the joy of it, joy and the freedom. That's quite rare. That's actually quite rare. Thanks, Charlotte. Kate, you chose Nordstrom. An open mind is the best look.
Look at me. Mean what you say. Look at me. Give it back to her. I want to have a human experience. Who are you in this sculpture? Find yourself.
3, 25. Good job.
26. Steady, yeah? Move quietly. Find the passion. Connect with each other. Make your place. Take your spot.
You look nervous. What's wrong?
Kinda am. Look around, look up, look all around. Take in your entire environment. Be a big bear. Good, embody your power. Think of who you are in the sculpture. Connect with each other. Stop. Yeah! That was a great battle.
Kate.
Okay, so it was a really fascinating panel when we had, and we were kind of like working through our thoughts and ideas for pieces of discipline. And we thought this piece stood out in terms of an editorial piece from, it's not a classic advertising piece for kind of a high street store, but it's also not a classic advertising piece for kind of any kind of advertising. We thought it was beautiful that it was wrapped around the poem, but if you the poem, the sound design, the pauses, and similar thing, there's ways you can watch this. You can watch this with or without sound. You can watch this in a way that you are critiquing it as a piece of art, or you're critiquing it actually as a commercial and how inclusive it is. And it did cover kind of like a different rhythm and poetry. And for example, in terms of editing, the Apple Bounce is beautifully crafted and beautifully edited, but it had like a rhythm that you got into and you understood. We felt that this piece had a different step change in editing. So when you're cutting between a scene of cowboys spotlit outside, maybe at midnight, to a trumpet player, or there are these different push and pulls. But similar to the Facebook, the Facebook piece, The Never Lost, that was very true to the poem and added these beautiful pauses. We found this one had a very interesting, playful dynamic, and it was something where as an editor myself and our amazing jury and panel, we were just taken by this piece. And it was, the more you watch it, the more you enjoy the pauses or the strange casting, or you live with these different moments. So we were almost saying it'd be so similar to a behind the scenes. It'd be similar to see what the original creative pitch was and compare that to the final piece, because we felt this final piece kept the integrity of the original idea. And as an editor, when you're in the room with clients and creatives, or you're sharing how are these battles fought to give it this space, and how did this piece become kind of so beautiful with so much space? And it's selling clothing, but it's also selling humanity. And it just was just to us like an outstanding piece of work as part of the selection.
Well, let's get on to some questions. Seeing as Facebook brought it up, I think one of the things that COVID has shown is that themes can be dangerous, but let's talk about some of the themes that came through this year. What ones stood out for you?
What happened is, I think that we saw very quickly what happens when stock footage and licensed footage is used in the wrong way. And that is, all the brands all of a sudden have the same voice. There is no differentiation. They go to the same message. I mean, I think we've all seen that video that talked about like how all the COVID commercials are the same. And if you have the same brief, same message, and everybody goes for the same footage. There's one shot of a that's become very famous of a girl pointing at the moon, and I think it's in about 7 or 8 different commercials. So that goes against what we do, right, in advertising, which is trying to make brands famous and different and pop up from the noise and having a meaningful purpose on people's lives, versus just become part of the same noise that everybody's saying.
Well, to that point, I thought the Getty piece that I don't think was made in time for COVID, it wasn't connected to that. There was the story of a kind of a man's retrospective on his life from a hospital bed. But it was interesting that they were able to create emotion, and with sound design and the editing, that they created something that showed that you could find humanity in the clips, which I thought set it apart as a kind of for the editorial craft, but also it kind of set it apart.
Well, let's talk about mastering the art. What do you think are the most important ingredients? What makes award-winning work?
Maybe it was the Guardian piece around hope. I don't know if you've seen it, with a butterfly trying to break through a window. Really very simple piece, beautifully done. And there was a debate around, but what did the director do here? Because they had so many animators around it and the sound design and everything. But, for me as a director, I'm like, well, the director did everything. He didn't maybe physically, create the butterfly and, and do the lighting. But to me, this is a strong and good example of crafting and how bringing people together is important, and also choosing who to work with, or like choosing the best people around to execute a vision.
What role can craft play in creating uniqueness, given that there are ideas that come up again and again, and briefs that are the same for different products or competitive products even?
It was definitely about how it makes you feel, because that's the beauty of sound and music. It makes you feel something. So as I say, with Facebook, that's been done so many times, but the track just makes it completely different. So it's definitely about, that's to me what makes a piece unique, is the sound and the music.
I also feel that the Nordstrom piece that we just saw, it's, if you think of the brief, it's basically any brief. You've seen so many of these these vignettes of people doing weird things or not weird things, and there's like a diversity of people, different locations, different lighting, everything. But it's a very unique piece because the choices made there of the specific situations and the specific characters are unique, and makes it such a special and beautiful piece.
Especially with the Nordstrom piece was you have the Apple Underdogs, which is this amazing kind of like it could have been a feature film distilled into a trailer that became this, like, you know, that you actually got something so satisfying and enjoying about it, and you saw these insights, and there was so much work and production design, so it makes it such a well-rounded piece. And then you have something like the Lacoste, or you have the Apple Bounce, which feel like so considered and kind of prevised, and then kind of like the production design and the cinematography and the direction on all levels, but on, you know, on the day of filming. And then for me, for something like the Nordstrom piece, I feel like you had all this beautiful imagery and the craft of stitching it together, and I don't think you could have storyboarded what they ended up with, because I don't think you could have felt the emotion or the juxtaposition or the connection of the shots and the rhythm of that. So that's why I loved it in terms of the elements of the craft and how it is. That there's different ways to look at it in terms of the construction of the shots, but as an overall piece for editing. But we loved it as a lot of the films that you've all talking about were definitely in our shortlists. So it's interesting to see that a lot of them have all been selected by different juries.
You're talking about how important uniqueness is, right? And I think that, as you say, a lot of ideas are repeating, and a lot of the craft is repeating. I mean, when I look at the Lacoste piece that I chose, juxtaposing a vintage music track to a modern visual, that was invented by BBH with Levi's in the early 90s. So we've been going through years on years of that. But in the same way that chefs have a fold in their hat for every different way that they know how to cook an egg, I think that it's all about using the different craft, so cinematography, editing, music, existing footage, new footage, VFX, is how you use all these things. On the surface of the things, like how do you build a tone of voice and ownership for the brand, right? Like when you watch a Lacoste commercial, you're starting to see that is a Lacoste commercial year after year. When you look at the New York Times campaign that Deroga won with last year, it's a very unique. All of a sudden, the New York Times has a look and feel that transcend their advertising, and they're playing at their own publication. So I think it's how to use all those things. It's not just about like putting all those things to 11 and just to throw all that stuff and making unique or innovating for the sake of innovating. It's a very carefully threaded combination of all that on the service of the idea to make the brand stronger and the communication stronger.
You guys are all at the top of your game. There's a new wave of kids coming up, so they're going to be the caretakers of craft in the future. What advice have you got for the next generation?
I don't think it's just about the making. I think it's important for them to continue looking forward and bringing new, innovative, fresh ways of doing things, and also look at the past, to look at some, almost like in the way that if you go to Central St. Martin's to study painting, you will study art history. There is something to be said. We've been doing advertising now for 60, 70 years at a very high level, and there is something to be learned about what is come in the last 30, 40 years. And it's interesting when I work with a lot of, as you say, the new talent, how unaware they are of some of those things, or how they bring some things that, as I was talking about, like juxtaposition of new visuals with old music or things like that, or demos, right? They're looking now at, when they talk about ITZY or something, like, wow, that used to be called a demo. And it's building from something and know your classics to then challenge them and make it better. I think is the thing that I would tell them, because we've been doing advertising long enough that publications like the D&AD or Schultz or Cannes, there is a base of things that have taught the craft, and that could be the base to go further.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think culture is the most important thing in this business because we are at the crossroad of so many arts. And I think it's very important to look everywhere for inspiration because inspiration, it's a way of feeding your own creativity, but it's also a way of being motivated to do better things in general, looking at what other people do, you know.
I'm actually very much in touch with the next generation because I teach film and I teach workshops, and I sometimes, it's funny enough, pity this generation because they grew up, you know, with this in their hand and they're exposed to so many things, and it can be so confusing. Sorry, too many languages in my head, but I just feel that it can be so confusing sometimes, and I see these kids and they're like, oh, there's Instagram and there's this and this, and maybe I'll just film really beautiful images, put them together and then call it something. And I think the most important thing here is to have, first of all, to stay connected and to who you are and be sincere, and to learn to observe things and to let things sink in, because you know, I meet kids that they're just like this all the time. They're not even looking at what they're, you know, what they're doing. It's just listening, observing, and kind of giving it the time to sink in and to process things, and not just thinking, oh, you know, I can do this, you know. It's not just the technicality, it's about humanity, I think, in the pieces or in what they're doing.
I think it's important to say to especially the younger, newer generations, that to me, and what I was taught by the people that taught me how to edit, but for any discipline, you need to voice if you need to take time, and you need to find the time to find your voice. So if you're given a deadline to create a treatment, or to even like create a first edit, if you need time to view your footage and view your rushes or your dailies, and actually just breathe and try and take what people have, everyone's time that put into the process. This whole modern world is getting so truncated, and yes, we have new technology, and yes, we can be on you know, we can turn around everything so much faster, but sometimes just taking that time, and even just like, I call it the overnight edit. So, you know, whether your director's looking at a cut or someone, if you just view it with fresh eyes and let it breathe, that's when, to me, you can create that outstanding work, because you've taken that moment just to have a breath.
We have just a few minutes left. So I guess it's my job now to wrap it up. Really, I just want to say thank you to everyone who was on the panel. I hope the people watching found it really interesting. I certainly did. And given that we've been hearing that craft's under stress, times are tough, it's pretty obvious that even under these conditions, you can make some pretty amazing things with really great craft. You keep telling clients they have to be brave. And I think the general message that I want to give as a watcher of advertising and an analyst of advertising or a commentator of advertising is that you guys, please keep being brave.